Now, what is going on, guys? Today we're going to take a look at Sequelize and how to do migrations and see data with Postgres. And I think they have like Sequelize overall has a pretty good documentation. I just found it a little bit overwhelming when I started taking a look at this. And that's why today I want to talk about migrations and see data and like how to get started with this library. So let's see. Yeah, so to get started with this, we kind of need some example schema that we want to build. And I decided to just use the one we also used for the objection tutorial. So to say, okay, let's try to model a small part of YouTube. So there are users, and every user can have at maximum one channel. So that means either you have 0 channels or you have exactly one channel. You cannot have multiple channels. Now the thing is, obviously there are YouTubers who have multiple channels, but then they have multiple users. So with user, I mean you have a registered user with a unique email address, right? Okay. And yeah, so a user can have 0 or 1 channels, and every channel can have an arbitrary amount of videos. And the thing is, you can also sign up for YouTube without actually having a channel, right? So you need to explicitly create it. So this is what we want to model. And it's the same thing that we also did in the Objection.js tutorial. And I did it because I want to show you the differences. I think it's just nice if we model the same schema and then you can figure out like what works for you. So to sum this up, you have a user table, and this user has like an ID. It has a couple of other values, and it can have 0 or 1 channels, but every channel belongs to exactly one user. So you cannot have one channel belonging to multiple users. And then every channel can have an arbitrary amount of videos. That's why I put n here. And every video belongs to exactly one channel. Yeah. And this is basically the thing that we want to model. So I would say let's just get started. I'm just going to pull open my terminal, and I'm going to make a new directory, and I'm going to say Sequelize tutorial. I'm going to cd into this directory, and I'm going to say npm init-yes to create a package.json file. Okay, that should be it. Now I have this, and we can directly go to documentation, and you can see on getting started how to set everything up. So we need Sequelize, and then we need the respective database driver. So I'm going to use Postgres. You can use any other database listed here, even SQLite, then you don't have to set everything up manually. I will also include the code or a link to the repo in the description. So you can just have a look at the repo, and there I will also put instructions on how to set up Postgres if you're not sure how to do it. Okay, so I'm just going to say I want to copy this, and I'm just going to say npm install Sequelize. And then we also need these two over here. So I'm going to install them as well. Okay, and while this is installing, let's take a look at what sections they have in the documentation. So they have a lot of different things like core concepts and querying and all that kind of stuff. But before we get to all of this, it's important to understand that to query something, we first need a schema. And to get the schema, we need to work with migrations. Now, there is some like a section that talks about syncing and all these kind of things. Like, don't use that. Like, directly go for migrations. Migrations are like one of the most important features of when it comes to these tools, because your database schema is going to continually evolve, right? So if you scroll down to this, like to other topics, I think it's, where is it? It's over here, yeah. So just click on that, and then it will explain how to perform like migrations. Yeah, let's look at this file. So you can, or let's look at this chapter here. And they, similar to Next.js and to Objection, which is based on Next.js, they have a dedicated CLI for that. Okay, and this is what we want to install. So take this thing, go over here and install that as well. And this CLI is going to allow you to create migrations and also to create seed data. So let's install this. And then what we also want is, we want an empty project. Okay, if you want an empty project, just execute this command. That's the next thing we're going to do. And the reason is that to have or to make use of this CLI, it expects a certain structure, right? So you want to have migrations, and you want to have seed, or they call it seeders. So files that contain example data, essentially. And you can use the CLI to kind of auto-generate all of this, which is kind of nice. If we go over here and we just copy this command from the documentation and execute it, you can see that it creates like a whole bunch of directories. So for one, it creates like a configuration directory, which contains a JSON file where you need to put in the credentials for your database, which is kind of a little bit weird because typically you don't want to hard code your credentials anywhere. But for development and for this tutorial, we're just going to do it. For production, obviously you don't want to have like your database password in any file, in any Git repository, right? You always want to use environment variables. But anyway, this is fine. I think we're not going to make use of production and test anyway. We're just going to focus on development here. Okay, and then we have migrations. So this is where we are going to specify the initial database schema, models, and they have like this index.js file, which does a little bit of magic. So basically it's going to iterate, or it's going to look at all the contents of the folder, and it's going to register the models for it. So you don't need to touch this. I mean, you can take a look at if you want. Like you can see it's kind of looking at the directory, and then it's stripping away like the .js prefix, and then it's actually with this statement wiring up the models that we haven't created yet. And the other thing is seeders. So basically files where you can put example data into. So as you can see, like there's quite a bunch of folders. It's probably more than with objection or with next, but that is totally fine. Okay, cool. So that's it. Let's go to the documentation and let's see what we need to do. So they tell us, okay, we first need to set up this configuration. And I have a Postgres instance running, and this is pgadmin. And if you look at like the databases here on the left, you can see I have a database called Sequelize tutorial. And currently it does not have any tables. So it's like empty. And this is the database that I'm going to use. In case you also use SQL, make sure that you have some empty database. If you don't have one, just right click on databases and then on create and then on database. And by the way, this tool is called pgadmin. So it's like a free and open source tool. So you need to install Postgres, and then it's just a UI for managing your Postgres. Okay, cool. So let's just do that. Let's go back to our file. And let's first take care of the database configuration. So my username is this. Your username might be different. So when you install Postgres on your system, per default, it's going to create a user with the same name as you are logged into your operating system. Okay, and if you're in a Unix-based system, you can just run whoami to find out like what username you have. Okay, and this is my username. Per default, it created a user, and that's why like I'm just going to put this here. Per default, the password is also null, so no password. And the database is Sequelize _tutorial. So I always tend to use underscore, or you should use underscores in databases because some databases are case sensitive, others are not. Host is localhost. Yeah, you can leave it like that. And the dialect is, in my case, Postgres. So obviously, if you have a different database, you need to put the different dialect. If you're using MySQL, you need to put MySQL. And for the sake of completeness, I'm just going to copy and paste this in these three things. Even though I know I'm not going to use the production, maybe I'm going to use the test one though. But for production, I always want to have like some envars, but never hard code like the password or the usernames. That's a big security vulnerability. Okay, so here we go. We are done with filling up the the configuration, and now you can read like all of this. And actually the main point or the main idea now is to start creating your models and your migrations. So they have like some instruction on how to like run migrations, how to create them. Basically, you can auto-generate models, and what it's going to do is it's going to create like some files for you automatically, so you don't have to do it. So in our case, we can just take this, copy and paste this, and we're just going to say, okay, what do we want? Say we want to have a user, and user has an email. We don't care about last name. We also don't care about first name. So let's just leave it like that. And that is fine. And let's just execute this. Bam. And now you see that all of a sudden you have where is it? Here. You have a new file in here. And this is called user over here. And this is like some specific code that allows you to, so every model basically corresponds to one database table. And it basically already created like the JavaScript class for you, and it even created like a migration for you. So it automatically created like this file here, and similar to Next.js, you have up and down. So up means apply the migration, so create a specific table, and down means undo the current migration. And this is actually like very similar or comparable to objection, only the syntax is slightly different, right? So you can see, okay, there's like an ID, which is fine. We're going to leave it as an integer, not as UUID. There is like an email, there's a created at, and there's an updated at. So one more note here, Sequelize automatically takes care of created at and updated at. So per default, it adds these things automatically to every model because it's just a useful thing to have. But it can create a couple of issues. I just wanted to say that up front because we will need to do a few fixes there. Cool. So now that we have this, let's think about what we actually want to do. I want the ID thing here over there. I think it's fine, right? Okay. Here in the email, what I want is I want to say I don't allow null. Why? Because I always require that the email is there. And I also want to make this thing unique. Simply because I don't want two users with the same email, right? Otherwise I don't know what to do. Okay, and that's it pretty much. And the thing here is that the names here are going to be the names that Sequelize is going to generate in the database for us. So if we leave it like this, it's going to actually create a column that is named exactly like this. And as you can see, this is like camel case, which is kind of not the best thing, right? Your database columns and names should be named with underscore. And that means in your migrations, you should make sure that whatever tables you create, that you use underscores. At least that's what I do. Some people don't do it, but pretty much everyone is using underscores. In Sequelize, they kind of support it, sort of. But they just say, okay, with JavaScript you use camel case per default, so that's why we also use that for the database. But I'm not a big fan of it, honestly, so that's why I'm just going to do it like that. Yeah, and another thing I want to do is I maybe want to add like maybe a name, right? Okay, let's just say type is Sequelize .string. So as you can see, there's like different type definitions. And actually what you need to do is you just need to add like the columns that you want to have, right? So now we have ID, name, email, created at, and updated at. So I think that is fine. Yeah, let's see, what else did we want? If we go back to our browser, then we said, okay, we will have users, and we have channels, and we have videos. So we are going to need like 2 more tables. And that's why we can just go back over here. We can maybe make this lowercase and also make it singular. By the way, this is also a huge discussion. Should you make your table name like singular or plural? I always go with singular because it creates less problems. But there's like very different opinions about that. But I'm just going to make it singular, okay? So this is going to be the model name. And yeah, these are going to be the columns. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this. Whoops. It's hard to copy this here. Okay, I'm just going to take this and make sure to also copy the await. And I'm just going to take this and I'm going to go a little bit in here and I'm going to paste this in here, right? Because for first migration, we also want to have a channel table. And this one is pretty similar. So a channel will also have an ID. That is fine. It's going to have a name because every channel has a name. Maybe we should make this allow null false. And not like in SQL, the columns are nullable per default. So if you don't specify allow null, it can be null unless it's a primary key, obviously. Yeah, so we don't need like the email. We don't need that. So let's get rid of this. And I think that's it for now. We will add the foreign keys later, okay? And the next thing I'm going to do, I think I still have it copied, going to go in here and I'm going to paste it again because now I want to create the video column, the video table. So, which is basically this one over here. Yeah, and same game. So I'm just going to leave the ID as an integer. Again, I already mentioned you probably want to have your IDs as UUIDs in general because that has a couple of advantages because you have the ID before you push the value to the database. This is very important if you have a microservice-based system where different services are acting on a new event. But that's like details. So for the tutorial, we're going to leave it as integer because UUIDs are just hard to kind of see, or it would make it more complicated. Okay, we have video. What do we need? We want to have a title, I would say, right? And the title should be allow null false. Oh, and I think actually we should put this in here as well, right? Yeah, forgot that. Okay, a title, and yeah, we don't need the email, right? Cool. So these are the basic columns. Technically, we could add more columns, but I wanted to add one more detail, which is an interesting database design question. So if we think about this scenario, right? Every user can have one channel or can have 0 or 1 channel. And the question is always, where do you put the foreign key, right? So technically, we have 2 options. We could make something like in the user table, we could add a column which says channel ID. And then in here, we're going to add the ID. So for example, here, first user has null because he doesn't have a channel, and the second user has another ID. And then we can leave the channel table as it is. That's the first option. And then there's the second option, which is we are just going to put the user ID on the channel table, right? So we have to decide on which table do we put our ID, the foreign key. Do we put it in user or do we put it on channel? And actually, I want to give an update on that because I think in the last Objection.js videos we did differently. I think the best way to put it here is on the channel. Why? Because we know for sure that every channel must have a user. You know, so with this setup, you might have like a lot of nulls in this column, right? Because there's a lot of people who just consume on YouTube, and then you always have this null here in the column. But you know for sure that a channel cannot exist without the user. So if you ever have the situation that one item is kind of like mandatory, so to say, and the other one is optional, then you always put the primary key of the mandatory item, in our case user ID, inside of the channel table. Because like so, you avoid having a lot of nulls in this column, and you also avoid potential issues. So let's just say in here, you want to delete your channel, right? You're done with YouTube, you delete your channel. Then in order to delete this, you first need to set the channel ID here to null, and then you can delete like the entry in here, right? Because if you don't set this to null, then the database will say, oh, wait, hold on a second. Like you're trying to delete a record that is that has a reference or foreign key in another table. I'm not going to allow this, which is like good behavior, right? You don't have that problem over here. So if one user says, okay, I want to delete my channel, you can just delete that one row and it's gone. Totally fine. Yeah. So this is basically the idea. And that's why it's better to put the user ID, like in that case, inside of the channel table. Very good interview question, by the way, also. These are like the details that people ask sometimes. Okay. And that's why our channel is going to have an additional table, which is going to be like an addition column, which is going to reference our user. So let's go over here. Let's go to our channel. And the way you can do this is you define like the name of the foreign key. So you say channel ID, right? Because it references the primary key of the channel. And you just say, okay, the type is like an integer. Because remember the, oh no, that's wrong actually. Oh no, it's not channel ID, it's user ID, right? User ID, something like that, yeah. Okay, and it's user ID and it references the user table, right? And you can see here it's an integer, so our foreign key also needs to be an integer, obviously. Okay, and then you can say allow null false. And what you now need to do in order to make this like a foreign key, you can say references, and then you put in the model name, which is user, and the key, which is like the ID. Oops. And bear in mind that these things, like they need to be exactly the same, right? So user here is lowercase, user here is lowercase, and the user that we have over here is lowercase. Okay, so let's just do it like this, right? Maybe let's make it, okay. Actually, what I just realized, let's go back over here. Yeah, so basically you need to make sure that these match, right? So this basically references this table. So it needs to be the same, or maybe not, depending on what database you use. That's why you always want to have lowercase and snake case to avoid that problem. And the key here is like the column. So in that case, it's the ID. Yeah, and that's it. We can take this, and what we can do is we can just copy this and do the same here. So we're just going to say, instead of user ID, we have channel ID, and it's going to reference the channel, and it's also going to reference the ID column. And important thing here, allow null is false. So that means we do not allow a video to not, like a video must be released by a certain channel, right? There's no way that a video exists out of, it's just created. Right? Someone needs to upload it. That's why this always needs to be non-null. Yeah, so that's it pretty much. I think we're good on that. I'm just thinking, like, did we forget anything? Oh yeah, one last thing, obviously. Now we have been talking about how to create this migration, but we also need to talk about how to undo this. So you can just, or like in here, it basically says query interface drop table users. The thing is that, you know, now that our table has like foreign keys, the easiest way to undo all of this would be to say query interface dot drop all tables. Okay, so now drop all tables, and basically the only reason we can do that is because this is the first migration. And it's also kind of nice, right? You kind of see here the date, and I think I'm going to rename this because this create user is annoying. I'm going to name this init. Okay, and let's see, maybe I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to make a script out of it simply for documenting how it works. So I'm going to name this make, I don't know, model, right? So in case you're looking at the code and you don't know exactly what you need to run. Yeah, maybe like this. What you need to run, then like you can just copy and paste this command and then you will be fine. Cool. Yeah, and I think what we can now do is let's try to run this. Okay. And the way you can run this is if you scroll down here, it says npx Sequelize CLI database migrate. So let's also copy this. And while we're at it, let's make another script. So I'm just going to call this migrate. And I'm going to paste this in here. Okay, cool. And I just want to show or to make sure that we don't have any tables by accident. So let's scroll down here and you can see in tables, yeah, it's empty. So let's try to run this. Okay, so I am going to cancel this and I'm going to run npm run migrate. Let's see if it works. Bam, nice. So you can see like our migration ran. It even says like how long it took, right? 0.03 seconds, that's pretty good. And if we now go to our tables and we refresh, then you can see, whoa, cool. All of a sudden we got 4 tables even. Now you might ask, yeah, but why do we actually have 4? We only specified 3. So why do we have 4 now? Well, the reason is that the Sequelize meta contains some information which migrations have been run or not. And yeah, but I just want to show you, you can see here the created add has like an underscore here. Yeah, and you can see, okay, the string per default is a varchar with a maximum of 255 characters. If you want more, like you can allow more. For now, I would say it's fine. Let's take a brief look at, yeah, maybe this one. Yeah, so you can see all the tables or all the columns that we wanted are there. That's pretty good. Last one is like video. Yeah, nice. Video also works, right? We have the title, and this is really important. So once you figure out like how to do this migrations, you can put it inside of your workflow, right? So before you start your application, before you run Node index.js, and before your server starts up, you would basically execute the command we just executed and say, hey, if there's any new migrations, please execute all migrations. And this is really handy, right? Because you have a way of going forward and you have a way of going backward. Yeah, and speaking of backward, I think, yeah, here they have a command to actually undo all of this. And this is what I'm also going to copy. Simply, if you have a problem, you can just execute this and then it's going to remove everything. Okay, I can actually show that. So at the moment we have these things. So I'm going to run npm run and we named it down. Bam. So you see it kind of undid everything. And now theoretically speaking, if we did everything right, there shouldn't be any table anymore. So let me refresh this. Yeah. So the only thing you see, okay, you got this Sequelize metadata, and in here, like there's nothing. So it says I did not run any migration, right? We ran one migration, the first migration we had, and the only one, and then we undid it, and now we don't have any migration. And if you want to run again, you can just like run npm run migrate. Oops, and nice. Now your tables should be there again. So that's pretty handy, also pretty nice for development, right? So now they're here. Very good. So I think this is the most important thing. Another thing or something else, let's talk about seed data. So if you're developing, you want to have some example data, and it's annoying to go in here and write insert into table, whatever. And that's why they provide these seeders. So basically you can insert some example data inside of your database. This is what we're going to talk about next. So as you can see, we're not talking about like this, how to query like a user or how to create this model, because I trust you can go to you can go to the documentation over here. Oh wow, it's really slow. You can go over here, and I trust you can copy paste this, right? But we're actually talking about what you need, like from all of this over here, to kind of get started. And the most important part is migrations. Okay, so if we go down, you can see that we can actually create seed data. And yeah, let's copy this. So this is the command we actually have to execute. And yeah, I'm just going to take this and make a new script simply to document it. So I'm going to say, oops, make seed. Then I'm going to paste this. And here it says, okay, it's going to generate like a seed, and the name is going to be demo user. Okay, let's just execute this and see what happens. So I'm going to run npm run make seed. Okay, so let's see what it did. In the seeders directory, you can now see, okay, it has the current timestamp. So at the moment, it's beginning of February 2021. And it added like this demo user kind of thing. And now you have pretty much the same thing like you have in Next.js or in Objection, which is based on Next.js. You have this up and you have this down. So you can see the pattern is always the same. For migrations, you always have this up, like making the creating the tables. You have down, which is like undoing everything. And then for seed data, it's the same thing. Okay. Yeah. Let's go inside of here. And what we want to do is I just want to add a couple of things. And I'm not going to do or to explain a lot here, simply because it's boring in my opinion. I'm just going to explain like a couple of things. So I have like the code already here. So I'm just going to copy and paste it. And by the way, if you also want to copy and paste it, like the code or the repo is in the description down below. So just check this out. So what I'm basically just doing here is I'm saying, okay, I want to insert multiple users inside of our user database. And I'm just going to give it IDs, right? So in this case, it's 3 users with ID 1, ID 2, ID 3. And it's email user 1, add test, user 2, add test, and so on. And the created at and updated at, and this is like a little caveat here. So remember this created at and updated at, this is not like, it's not nullable. And that's why we need to put a value in here. And what's important to note is that Sequelize does not do this created at and updated at with SQL triggers, because otherwise we could just leave it out, and the database would take care of it. But this is actually done like as part of the Sequelize npm package. And since we are talking about seeds at the moment, so since we are not using the Sequelize package to insert data, we actually need to specify the created at and the updated at date. So that's why you have this over here. Okay, because you might wonder, well, but why do I need to specify this? Can't this thing just do it automatically? Yeah. And yeah, basically the idea here is that you say bulk insert, you say that you name the table. And here at the bottom, you have like options. So in or in our example, we just don't need them. So that's why it's empty. Yeah. And this is interesting, like this, so this bulk insert returns a promise, and we're just awaiting it. And for this, we don't care about exceptions, because the seed data is just, it's just test data. So if it throws, it's fine. It's just for development. Okay. And yeah, by the way, the order matters. This is important, right? Because remember, we said that we are going to go with the second solution, and that is we're going to have put the user ID inside of the channel table. So what would not have been possible would be to like insert two channels first and then afterwards the user, because we need to reference, like in this column, an existing user, right? So also, depending on where you put the foreign key column, it determines in what order records need to be inserted, like both in your production environment or like in your server, but also for your seed data, just that you know. So we could not have started with channel. We need to start with user, and that's why we're also using this await here. So we're waiting for our 3 users to be inserted. And then in the next step, what we're just doing is, wait, I just need to copy and paste this from my finished code already. Oh, wow, why is this so difficult? Okay, my mouse going here a little bit crazy. I just need to copy and paste this. Yeah, here it is. And then afterwards, and this is the interesting thing, you create 2 channels. So we're just going to pretend user 1 and user 2 have a channel, and user 3 does not. So it's important that the users already exist before we insert the channel records. And the same is actually true for the videos. So basically there's only one valid order in which you can insert data, because in order to insert a channel, you need a user. So you need to insert the user first, then you can insert the channel. And in order to insert a video, you need a channel, right? So it's like transitive dependency. Okay, so I'm just going to take the video thing and I'm going to insert this one as well here. So nothing special over here. We just have 3 videos, and the first 2 videos are by channel 1, so user 1, and the third video is by the second channel, so by user 2. And yeah, I just put like these names here, so it's like a little bit easier to understand. So this is pretty much our seed data file. Now you could insert like more, and you could, you could do more here, but I think this is fine for now. Okay, and this is how you get like seed data. Okay, that's nice. So let's go back to our documentation, and here you can see that, okay, you can generate it like this, and you can run your seeds like this. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back, and again, I'm going to make a script. Oh, over here. Yeah, maybe down here. I'm going to say not make seed, but actually seed. So to just say, hey, just execute all seeds we have. And let's just try this out, shall we? So if we didn't make a mistake, it should actually work. So I'm just going to run, to clear this. I'm going to run npm run seed. Nice. So it means that we just inserted like some seed data in the database. Okay, that's good. So technically, if we refresh, there should be some data in here somewhere. Okay, let's check out the channels. Where is it? Query tool? No, this one. Yeah, nice. So you can see here, like we have 2 entities, like the first channel and the second channel, and they both have timestamps. I think you can see it because my image is there, but it's there. Yeah, and the same thing like for users. So we have 3 users, user 1, user 2, user 3. All fine, looks good. And then with the video, yeah. So here are the videos. Yeah, so I would say that's it pretty much. I think we covered a lot. We covered migrations, we covered seed data, and this is actually everything you need to get started with Sequelize. So once you got this done, you can finally like go to the documentation, and start copying, pasting the commands for finding like individual items. I think the only thing we haven't done though is we haven't set up the models, but since this video is already quite long, I thought let's just leave it like that. If you guys want, we can make a follow-up on this. Let me just know in the comments below. Yeah, so that's it pretty much. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment if you have a question. You can also reach out to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @productioncoder. So again, thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one. Bye bye.